YouTube, how you doing? Donyea Goodman here. Welcome. This is Ask Donyea, as opposed to Donyea's Tech Moments. I kind of slacked off for real on the Tech Moments. Sorry. The whole thing with that is I got really busy. As some of you know, I moved from Seattle, Washington to Detroit. So I'm getting settled in. I'm in the process of getting settled in. Long process. So it's hard for me to sit down and do Tech Moments. I did post something on my fan page about if you had a question regarding music to ask me, what would it be? I got about 18 to 20 questions. Some of them I already answered. Some of them I haven't. However, I'm going to re-answer some of those questions for you because other people might have those types of questions. This isn't a show you how to do it video like by hand and on screen and all of that, but I am going to give you some tips and tricks and all of that as far as the answers to your question. The reason why I'm not going to show you is because when I get back started doing the Tech Moments, I'm going to do that, as well as start a YouTube series in the future called I haven't figured out a name for it yet, but that's when I'll sit down and show you my chord voicings and different things like that on the keyboard, or different things like that, and that'll come with time. However, right now, Ask Donyea, and so here we go. And to answer your question, how to treat drums in regards to effects when you're finally bring them out of programs such as Reason or anything like that, and bring it into Pro Tools or Cubase or any other DAW. Thing is, a lot of virtual plugins and virtual instruments, or a lot of Reason patches with the live drums and all that kind of stuff, a lot of the drums are pre-processed, meaning that there's already effects applied to them. So to apply effects in Pro Tools actually can oversaturate or overprocess your drums and cause them to either sound more digital, or it could just make them sound ugly, make them sound over compressed, or too much high end on the snare. Because that's the first thing a lot of cats want to do, is just boost the high end on the snare to make it crack. It's a mistake. That's not what you do. Be sure that the drums that you're importing into Pro Tools, or that you're importing into wherever your DAW, be sure that there's no processing on the sample, or even read the documentation that comes with whatever samples or sample library that you're using, and that'll tell you that whether some compression was applied or some EQ was already applied. Because if they've already done that, then they've taken a lot of guesswork out, which is the advantage. But the disadvantage is that it takes away your control of the mix, of the tone and how you want your drums to sound and feel. The first thing you need to do is make sure that your drums are recorded correctly and that the samples are the ones you want to use. So a lot of people, they want to make the kick to be thumping and bumping, and they want the toms to have a nice rich, nice attack with a nice tone, and they want the snare to have this nice crack. Well, you're not going to get that if you don't record with that. Even if you're recording live drums, like if the drummer is not using a cracking snare, your snare's not going to crack. If he doesn't have that kick and he doesn't have his toms tuned correctly, you don't have it mic'd correctly, you're not going to get the sound you want. So if you record great, your drums will sound great, and then you can mix from there. But to answer your question, you have to be careful, because drums can make or break your tune. So I would make sure your drums have the tone that you want them to have. And if that is the case, then more times than not, there's no need to add a bunch of effects in Pro Tools or in Cubase or whatever else. If they're already pre-processed, you can mix around them, unless you know what you're doing. But if you know what you're doing and then that's your intent, by all means. But other than that, make sure you have pure raw drum tracks or drum programming, using programs that you can strip all the effects off and it's just a raw drum. That way you have control over the overall mix. Thank you. In a lot of cases, less will always be more. When I first started out tracking songs, I was like age 13, and all I had was like 2 tape recorders, and I made it work. I would, in a Casio, and I would record one part and then put the tape in the other tape recorder and play it, and then record me playing along with it, then take that tape and put it in another tape recorder and then record me playing along with that. And I had all these parts, just tons and tons of parts. And then when I started working with different people on workstations, synthesizer workstations with keyboards and stuff, I would just record just all these parts, all this stuff in the track, because I had all this stuff in my head. And, there's a clarinet in here, and then there's a flute, and then I had all this stuff going on. I found out later that there's no need for that. Your track can say what you need to say without needing a bunch of embellishing instruments to say it. It all depends on what you program and how you program it. It's all about what you start with, and most of the time I kind of start with a progression, and then I track drums first and then track instruments around those drums. But in my head there's already a progression. As I track, I start learning what's too much, what's not too much. Okay, this is too much, I don't need that in there, I can take that out. And so it's all about your ear and about the feel, because sometimes you can just say too much, and you can do too much, and you can overproduce your music, and so less will always be more. As I said before, less is more. Less is always more. As far as starting and constructing a song, really, it all depends on what you hear first. Sometimes I'll hear a progression, and I'll play it, and I'll say, you know what, let me lay that down just so I don't forget the idea of the progression, and I track that, and then I track around it. Sometimes I hear the drums first, I'll play that, I'll track the drums out, and then I'll play along with it. So it all depends on what you hear first. There are no rules of thumb when it comes to creating and composing a song. If you hear a melody line first, play the melody to the tempo. If you hear a piano or whatever, play that. It used to matter when you were recording to like analog 2-track or analog 4-track, because whatever was the last instrument recorded tends to be the strongest instrument that stood out. And so a lot of times when I was using my tape recorders, I would do my drums last, my bass and drums last, because I wanted those to be the heaviest instruments that drive the song. But now in digital land, I just recorded whatever I hear first. There are no. It all depends on what you're trying to do, what you're trying to achieve. If you want something to just be able to get your ideas out and get them to sound decent, get you a MacBook Pro and get you a MIDI controller and GarageBand. GarageBand will do it, or Logic, Cubase, anything of the sort. Reason. Logic's a good one-stop shop. Reason is a good one-stop shop. And you'll end up spending somewhere around $2,000 to $2,500 to get yourself started, really. And so that'll probably be your budget. I would start with no less than $2,500 to get yourself going. Also, in addition to that, if you plan on recording vocals, you're going to need a microphone, and you can get a decent condenser mic for recording some okay vocals, anywhere from $100 to $500, depending on how much you're willing to spend. You can get a decent sounding condenser mic for $100. Of course, the more you pay, the better the mic's going to be. And then you're going to need an audio interface. That can be anywhere from $75 to $300, depending on the kind of interface you get. Once again, I'm going with small budget now. I'm not going with big budget with A to D converters and all that, because they're going to try to sell you that, and people are sold on that, and that's great. But for those of us who have small budgets and want to be able to get our ideas out the best way possible for as little as money possible, to save you some money, anywhere from $100 to $350, you can get a nice audio interface to go with your MacBook Pro and your software and all that. That way you can record outside sources, a guitar or a bass or some horns or whatever you want, or do vocals, and that's what you're looking for. As far as books, the best book you can read is experience. trial and error. That's the greatest teacher. Any book you buy will be educational, but a lot of theologies and musical theologies and production theologies in the book are not going to apply to you, and so you'll find yourself having to take what you can from this book and take what you can from that book and take what you can. So the best thing to do is to just start doing it, and the more you do it, the better you get at it. Trust me, my first tracks, I'm not going to ever let you guys hear them because they sucked. They were horrible. They were a joke. But I just kept doing it. I kept doing it. I kept doing it. And the more I did it, the more I learned how to tweak sound. The more I learned how to make this sound like that. And the more I did it. Even now, I'm still learning how to define and mix and produce and do all that. And then being in studio engineers, seeing other engineers, how they make things sound a certain way, and listening to records that are mixed the way that I like. Experience is the best teacher. A lot of things. The fact that it's you is what makes it new and fresh, because everyone's production and everyone's sound is going to be different, even if you have a similar sound or a similar style. Like, the fact that it's you is going to make it different. It's really all about how you put yourself out there. Right now, internet's the thing. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. It's really all about what people see when they see you, and you have to always constantly be thinking of new ways and new things to do. It's all about the people you have on your team. You're only as big as your network. I try to include people that I'm close to, that I've worked with in music, to help bring in a variety of style and sound to the music, because it's important. It's important. I don't want the world to see me doing everything, but I'm always constantly trying to figure out, what's the next thing, what's the new, what's next, what can I put out there next. It's just a matter of always finding new ways to approach the music you create, new ways to approach how you compose, the instruments and the sounds you use, the people that you bring on your team, and how you integrate them. You got to stay active. You got to keep doing stuff. You can't just lay dormant. You can't just say you have a production company. My former executive producer, Ron Jones, believe it or not, he wasn't really nobody huge, but he was a famous Las Vegas club singer. He used to sing in the clubs and casinos, and put a lot of money behind me back in the day. In his house, and he had this nice little house in his big old living room, and I sat down on this big white baby grand piano, and I was playing. He was like, "Man, you sound good." He said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I'm doing this production, this and doing that and whatever." And he looked at me, he said, "Donnie, you're not a producer unless you produce something." Go figure. I hadn't produced one album yet. That stuck with me. And so I figured the best way is to always be producing something, always be creating, and putting something out there. And that's how you stand out, is that you're always creating, you're always producing, you're always moving, you're always finding something new to put out there and create. Hey, this is Donyea. It's been great. We're out of time. YouTube only lets me do 15 minutes, but there is a part 2 that's going to be coming out. I'm going to be answering some more questions, and if you have any more questions, feel free to message me. Feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I'll get to them and get back to you, and they'll be on the next and upcoming Ask Donyea video. So thanks again for your time. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for listening to my music. I really appreciate it. Thank you. All right. Bless you. Go.